Hi, I'm Roger Blumenthal, professor of medicine at Johns Hopkins, and I'm director of the Johns Hopkins Ciccarone Center for Prevention of Heart Disease. It was a week ago today at the American Heart Association meetings. Dr. Baughman went out on his usual early morning run. Dr. Baughman had a family history of early heart disease and decided at a young age he was going to try to keep himself in tip-top shape, follow an excellent diet, low in fat, he emphasized fruits and vegetables, and he would tend to run somewhere 5:30 in the morning. And at 6 a.m., just 2 blocks north of the convention center in Orlando, he was struck by a car and was killed at the scene. It was a tremendous tragedy for so many of us who knew him so well over the years. I started my internship here at Johns Hopkins in 1985, and I was trying to decide whether to go into either gastroenterology or cardiology. And a month working with Ken Baughman on the cardiology consult service solidified my belief that I really wanted to go into cardiology. Ken Baughman was the most dynamic professor that I had at Hopkins, and it was someone that so many of us tried to emulate. And he was the person who offered me my first job when I finished fellowship, and he was instrumental in the development of our comprehensive preventive cardiology center here at Hopkins. So aside from my parents and my wife, Ken Baughman has had the greatest influence on my life and career. Ken Baughman went to college at University of Missouri, or Mizzou as he liked to call it. He did his residency here at Hopkins and did cardiology training here. And Ken was one of the assistant chiefs of service, essentially the chief resident. He did that for 2 consecutive years, so he had a tremendous background in internal medicine. He did some work up at Massachusetts General and then came back to Hopkins and joined the faculty in 1979. He was the one who really founded the heart failure service, the cardiomyopathy service. He was one of the pioneers in the optimal diagnosis and treatment of myocarditis, congestive heart failure, and he played a key role in the heart transplantation work done here at Hopkins. He was a co-author of about 150 peer-reviewed manuscripts, and he was also an associate editor of the New England Journal. He was a gentleman who specialized in heart failure, but just as there are a few doctors who seem to know a lot about every aspect of medicine, Ken was one of them, and he was the consummate clinician, and we were fortunate to have him as our chief of cardiology here at Hopkins for 9 years, and then subsequently he became second in command at Brigham and Women's Hospital and director of the advanced heart failure or advanced heart disease section at Brigham. And he was the driving force between the recently constructed Shapiro Cardiovascular Center at the Brigham. He was universally loved and admired by so many people, and thousands upon thousands of grateful patients are still alive or had much better quality of lives because of Ken Baughman. Ken Baughman developed a superb database here about cardiomyopathy, myocarditis, and endomyocardial biopsy. It was the launching pad for a number of people's careers, such as Art Feldman, Ed Casper, Dan Judge, Louis Baruch, and many others. He was also head of the ACC COCAT's guidelines about how to optimally train cardiovascular fellows, and he was the lead author of the first task force and the last 2 renditions of that. He was a master educator and a master clinician, and he was someone who, probably because of his superb internal medicine training, really was an expert in so many things dating back to congenital heart disease, to coronary atherosclerosis, to heart failure, to arrhythmias. He was really a jack of all trades, and he was also a superb athlete and really had very high standards for both patients as well as for himself. And it was that drive to succeed and to run triathlons and marathons that led him to get up nearly each and every morning and go on long runs. And unfortunately, his last run was tragic in that he was hit by a car in Orlando and died. One, he got me interested in cardiology and just being around him, the way he interacted with patients. He had sort of a Clint Eastwood tough guy approach at times, but he could also be so empathetic, and he knew how to talk to patients and motivate them. He had very high standards. He knew what needed to be done to build up clinical research here at Johns Hopkins in cardiovascular medicine and at Harvard Brigham and Women's Hospital. There were so many house staff and fellows that he got to know well, and we all greatly benefited from him. I think really the face of cardiology at Johns Hopkins in the 1980s and 1990s was really Ken Baughman. He had a tremendous influence during his 7 years up at Brigham and Women's Hospital. He and I watched many Hopkins lacrosse game together with his wife Cheryl Baughman and their sons Matt and Chris. The last time we got together for a game was at Gillette Stadium in 2008 when Hopkins played Syracuse for the national championship. But fortunate to go up with my mom and my wife and son to the Baughman's beautiful home in Newton, Massachusetts on several occasions, and he and his wife have been guests in our home too. It was just someone who greatly influenced my career and the way I try to conduct myself, and someone who will always miss, but I think a lot of us will say what one of our other former cardiologists, Hopkins, wrote recently in theheart.org, namely when you're faced with a challenging patient or a difficult situation, you sort of say, what would Kenneth L. Baughman do? And I think we've learned so much from him directly and indirectly about the way he interacts with patients, colleagues, and how he really fought for us as chief of cardiology. So much of what he said we needed to have and demanded from the hospital president and dean that they wouldn't give us were things that the following, the chief, Eduardo Marban, who took over for Ken Baughman, eventually got many of those concessions. So Ken really was ahead of his time. Johns Hopkins cardiology was very much focused in on dog work, basic science work, but Ken was the one who realized that a lot of people needed to get trained in clinical research. He started the collaborations that we now have with the Hopkins School of Public Health and clinical trials, how to understand statistics and trial design. He was the consummate professor, and we all miss him very much.